I can still remember the smell of my mother's house that day, the faint trace of lavender from the fabric softener she always used, mixed with the lingering scent of something frying in the kitchen. It was the kind of scent that used to make me feel at home. Used to. I knocked twice, then let myself in. Mom never locked her door when she was expecting me. She was sitting in her usual spot in the living room, a cup of tea balanced on the armrest, the television playing at a low volume. She looked up and smiled, her soft, knowing smile, the kind she always gave me when she thought I had good news to share. "Daniel," she said warmly, setting her tea down. "You look handsome today. What's the occasion?" I chuckled, taking a seat across from her. "Well, Mom, I have something to tell you." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, flipping the screen toward her. A picture of Elena and me, taken the night before, beaming under the glow of candlelight. A delicate engagement ring glimmered on her hand. "We're engaged," I said, unable to suppress my smile. "Elena and I are getting married." For a long moment, my mother just stared. The air between us thickened, stretching into an unnatural silence. Then, finally, she spoke. "Can't you marry me instead?" I blinked, sure I had misheard. "What?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Come on, Mom, don't joke like that." But she wasn't laughing. She wasn't even smiling. Her hands, wrinkled with time, folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes, dark, unwavering, locked onto mine. "I mean it," she said softly. "No woman will ever love you the way I do. I raised you. I made you the man you are. And now, you're just leaving me." A cold weight settled in my stomach. I let out a breath, forcing a chuckle, though my hands suddenly felt clammy. "Mom, I'm not leaving you," I said carefully. "I'm starting a life with someone I love. You'll always be part of it." But she didn't seem to hear me. Her gaze had drifted to the photo on my phone, her lips pressing into a thin line. "She's only here for your money," she murmured. "You know that, don't you?" I stiffened. "That's not true." Mom's head tilted slightly, as if observing me from some unreadable angle. Then she sighed, reaching for her tea again, taking a slow sip before speaking. "Do you know how much I sacrificed for you, Daniel? How many nights I stayed awake while you were sick? How many meals I skipped just to make sure you had enough? And now, after everything, you choose her over me." Her words cut deep, an invisible blade twisting beneath my ribs. I loved my mother. I always had. She had raised me alone after my father walked out. She had given me everything, even when she had nothing. But something about her tone unsettled me. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This isn't a competition. Elena and I are in love. I want you to be happy for us." She said nothing, just stared, her fingers curling around the rim of her cup, nails tapping gently against the porcelain. I should have known then. I should have understood that this was just the beginning. The first few days after my announcement were off. At first, it was small things. Subtle, almost unnoticeable shifts in my mother's behavior. She became strangely sweet, too sweet. Calling me multiple times a day, checking in more than usual, asking if I was eating well, if I was sure about Elena. I ignored it, brushing it off as normal parental concern. But then came the manipulation. Late one night, Elena woke up to her phone buzzing incessantly. She picked it up groggily and saw a missed call. "Margaret, 5. Concerned, she answered. "Elena." My mother's voice was trembling, weak. I don't feel well. My heart, it's beating so fast. I think I might." A sharp inhale. "Oh God." Elena shot up in bed. "Margaret, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" There was silence. Then, in the faintest whisper, "I just don't want to die alone." By the time Elena shook me awake to tell me what was happening, I was already groggy, my head pounding. "She said she's having heart issues," Elena whispered urgently. I shot up immediately, my heart hammering. I called an ambulance. I rushed to her house. But when I arrived, I found my mother sitting on the couch, looking perfectly fine, sipping tea with the television playing in the background. She turned to me with an innocent expression. "Oh, Daniel, what are you doing here so late?" I stood there dumbfounded. Mom, you called Elena. You said you were having heart problems." Her face twisted in confusion. "Heart problems?" she repeated, placing a hand over her chest. "Oh, sweetheart, I just had a little flutter. Nothing to worry about." You two didn't need to rush over. Elena and I exchanged looks. My gut twisted, but I shook it off. Maybe she really had felt something and it had passed. Maybe we had overreacted. That was mistake number one. A week later, Elena showed up at my apartment, pale-faced and clutching her phone. "Your mom called me again," she said, her voice tight. "What now?" I sighed. "She said she needed to tell me something about your past." A chill ran through me. "What did she say?" Elena hesitated. "She told me you used to hit people when you were younger, that you had a temper, that you—" I grabbed her shoulders. "Elena, that's a lie." She searched my face, as if trying to read me. I felt something tighten in my chest. "Do you believe her?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. "No, of course not. But Daniel, she's trying to turn me against you." I swallowed hard. And then my mother took it one step further. 2 days later, I got a frantic call from her house. "Daniel," she gasped. I fell. Oh God, my hip. I rushed over, heart pounding. I found her sprawled on the floor, clutching her leg, pain etched across her face. And standing over her was Elena, pale as a ghost. She slipped," Elena stammered. "I barely touched her, but she just, I felt a deep, terrible rage boiling inside me. I knelt beside my mother, who looked up at me, her eyes welling with tears. "She pushed me," she whispered. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I looked at Elena. I saw the horror in her eyes. I saw the triumph in my mother's. And I realized I was caught in something far, far worse than I ever could have imagined. I used to think love was unshakable, that when you truly loved someone, nothing, no amount of whispers, no rumors, no outside force, could come between you. But I was wrong. Love isn't just about feelings. It's about trust. And trust can be broken. My mother understood this better than anyone. It started with a text message. A random number. No name. No profile picture. Just a simple, cutting line. "You might want to check who your fiancé is really spending her nights with." I stared at my phone, frowning. It was late, past midnight. Elena was asleep beside me, her breath slow and steady. I should have ignored it. But I didn't. I texted back. "Who is this?" No reply. The next day, another message came, this time with a photo, grainy, low quality, like it had been taken in a hurry. But the image was unmistakable. A woman with dark hair. A familiar silhouette. Leaning in close to a man at a restaurant. I swallowed hard. "Elena." "No." I stared at the image for minutes, my thoughts warring against themselves. It looked like her. Same long black hair. Same way she tilted her head when she laughed. But it couldn't be. Could it? "Hey." Elena's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. She was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, tying her hair back. "You okay?" I slipped my phone into my pocket. "Yeah, just work stuff." She smiled, walking over and pressing a kiss to my cheek. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the seed had been planted. And once doubt takes root, it grows. Margaret's words seeped into everything. At first, it was subtle. My friends started acting differently. Texts left on read, plans made without me. My cousin Anna, who had always adored Elena, suddenly looked uncomfortable around her. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked her at a family gathering. Anna hesitated. "Look, Daniel, I don't want to get in the middle of things. But your mom's really upset. She says Elena's trying to pull you away from her, that she doesn't let you visit anymore." I frowned. "That's not true. She says Elena talks down to her, that she controls you." "I don't know, man. Maybe just be careful." I clenched my jaw. It was working. My mother was winning. Then came the money. One afternoon, Elena burst into my office, face pale. "Daniel," the venue deposit bounced. I looked up from my laptop. "What?" "The wedding venue." She shoved her phone at me, her hands shaking. "They said the payment was canceled." I checked my bank. Everything we put aside for the wedding is gone. My stomach dropped. That wasn't possible. I immediately pulled up my own accounts, my fingers ice cold against the keyboard. Funds transferred to M. Hathaway. Amount, $35,000. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. No, it couldn't be. I gritted my teeth, dialing my mother. She picked up on the first ring, her voice warm, sweet, like she hadn't just stolen from me. Daniel, I was just thinking about you, sweetheart. Mom, I said, my voice shaking with barely contained anger. Did you take money from my account? A pause. Then, a soft chuckle. Oh, darling, that money was just sitting there. You know, I was thinking, why spend so much on a wedding when you and Elena could have something simpler? That money will do much better invested in something meaningful. Like your future. Our future. I clenched my fists. You had no right. You should be thanking me, she said, her tone turning icy. Because she certainly isn't worth that much. I hung up before I could say something I'd regret. Elena was staring at me, her eyes searching mine. It was her, wasn't it? I exhaled slowly. I'll fix it. But she didn't look relieved. She looked defeated. Then, one evening, Elena received a package. No return address. No markings. Just a plain manila envelope, waiting on our doorstep. Inside were photographs. Elena's hands trembled as she flipped through them. The first picture was of a woman, someone who looked exactly like Elena, lying in a hospital bed, her face bruised, her eyes closed. The second photo was worse. A morgue tag wrapped around the woman's wrist. A note fell out. For words, scrawled in jagged handwriting. You're next. Walk away. Elena dropped the envelope like it had burned her. I grabbed it, my heart hammering. My vision blurred with rage. Who the hell? But I already knew who. Elena turned to me, her voice shaking. Daniel, this isn't just mind games anymore. Your mother is dangerous. I ran a hand through my hair, my pulse pounding in my ears. We don't know for sure that are you serious? Elena's voice cracked. She's been lying. Stealing. She's turning people against me. And now this? Daniel, I love you, but if you don't see what's happening, she broke off, biting her lip. I swallowed hard. You what? She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. I don't know how much more of this I can take. A sharp pain cut through my chest. I reached for her, but she took a step back. And for the first time since I had put that ring on her finger, I felt like I was losing her. And worse? I wasn't sure if I could stop it. I always thought the worst kind of pain was physical, the kind that knocked the air from your lungs, that left bruises and scars. But I was wrong. There is a pain worse than that. The pain of watching the woman you love walk away. Elena didn't pack much. Just a suitcase. A single bag filled with essentials. She wouldn't even let me help her carry it. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale, but her posture, her stance was firm. I can't do this anymore, Daniel, she whispered. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. And that was the worst part. It was the voice of someone who had nothing left to fight for. I swallowed hard. Elena, please. Just give me time. I can fix this. She shook her head. You should have fixed it before it got this far. Her fingers brushed mine as she reached for the door handle. And for a split second, I thought she would change her mind. That she would turn around, look at me the way she used to, and say she wasn't ready to give up. But she didn't. She stepped outside, pulled the door shut behind her, and just like that, she was gone. The silence in the apartment was unbearable. I sat there, staring at the space where Elena had stood just moments before, my mind a storm of memories of her laughter, her warmth, the way she used to trace circles on my palm when she was nervous. Gone. Because of her. Because of my mother. The realization crashed over me like a tidal wave, pulling me under. Margaret had done this. She had poisoned everything. And I had let her. I clenched my fists, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. I had spent my whole life being the perfect son, the provider, the protector. I had built businesses, investments, a future, not just for myself, but for her. And how had she repaid me? By ripping away the one person I truly loved. No, no more. If my mother wanted to control me, to own me, she was about to find out just how wrong she was. I moved fast. Faster than I ever had in my life. I grabbed my laptop and logged into my financial accounts. Every trust fund, every investment, every dollar I had ever put aside for her gone. With a few keystrokes, I revoked her access to everything. Her luxury apartment? Canceled the lease. Her credit cards? Frozen. The monthly deposits I had been sending her for years, making sure she never had to lift a finger again? Cut off. I wanted her to feel it. The weight of every lie she had told. The cost of every life she had ruined. It didn't take long before the calls started. First, it was a text. Margaret, sweetheart, I think there's a problem with my account. Can you check it for me? I ignored it. Then came the calls. 1, 2, 5, 10. Then voicemail after voicemail. Her voice going from confusion to frustration. Then finally, panic. Daniel, something's wrong. My cards aren't working. I tried calling the bank, but they said my accounts are frozen. Can you fix this? Please, sweetheart. Delete. Daniel, I don't know what's happening. The landlord says I have to leave by the end of the month. Where am I supposed to go? You wouldn't do this to your own mother, would you? Delete. Daniel, please. I'm begging you. I don't have anywhere else to turn. Just talk to me. I let out a breath, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles went white. She sounded so small, so helpless. But then I remembered. I remembered Elena's tears. I remembered the fear in her eyes when she held those photographs in her shaking hands. I remembered every manipulative word my mother had ever whispered, every game she had played, every lie she had told. And I felt nothing. So when the final message came, one last, desperate plea. I'm sorry, Daniel. Please, I just want to hear your voice. I listened, and then I deleted it. Without a word, without a single ounce of regret. Margaret Hathaway had finally lost. And this time, there was no one left to save her. There's a feeling you get when things are too quiet. Like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I had spent months picking up the pieces of my life. I worked. I rebuilt. I forced myself to stop looking at old pictures of Elena, to stop wondering where she was, who she was with. I told myself Margaret was gone, that she was just a bad dream I had finally woken up from. But I should have known better. She wasn't finished with me. Not yet. It started with a phone call. Sir, there's been a breach. I barely heard the rest. My company's accounts. Hacked. Millions gone overnight. I rushed to the office, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. By the time I arrived, my team was in full panic mode. Firewalls? Bypassed. Encrypted data? Corrupted. Backup servers? Wiped. Years of work. Gone. Who the hell did this? I demanded. My IT lead swallowed hard. We don't know. Whoever did it, they covered their tracks too well. I slammed my fist on the table. Too well. Like someone who knew me. Knew how my systems worked. Like someone who had been watching. A cold chill crept up my spine. Margaret. No. That wasn't possible. She was broke, barely surviving. How could she pull this off? And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The next attack wasn't digital. It was personal. I was in the middle of damage control when my assistant ran in, her face pale. Daniel. She hesitated. You need to see this. She handed me a folder. I flipped it open. My stomach dropped. Inside were documents. Old contracts, emails, things that should have been buried years ago. Things that could land me in serious legal trouble. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just about money. This was about ruining me. About tearing down everything I had built. I grabbed my coat and stormed out. If Margaret was behind this, I was going to make her admit it. I was halfway to my car when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered. Silence. Then a voice. Familiar. Shaky. Daniel, it's me. Elena. My breath caught in my throat. Elena? Where are you? A pause. Then a whisper. I think someone's watching me. I froze. Elena, what are you talking about? She took a shaky breath. I tried to ignore it at first, but strange things kept happening. My emails were hacked. My address got leaked. And then last night, someone broke into my apartment. My pulse pounded in my ears. Are you safe? Where are you now? More silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Daniel. I don't think I can trust anyone. The line went dead. I called back. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. Elena was gone. Vanished. And I knew, without a doubt, that this was Margaret's doing. I found her sitting on a bench in a rundown neighborhood. She looked different. Weaker. Older. Her hair unkempt, her clothes worn. A frail figure against the backdrop of a crumbling city. For a second, just a second, I almost believed she was harmless. Almost. She looked up as I approached. Daniel, she whispered, eyes glistening with tears. You found me. I clenched my fists. Where's Elena? Her brows furrowed. Elena. She blinked, shaking her head. Oh, sweetheart. I don't know what you mean. Liar. I took a step closer. You've been behind everything, haven't you? I hissed. The hack. The leaks. The threats. She laughed softly. A small, broken sound. Daniel. I'm just an old woman. She gave me a sad smile. How could I possibly do all that? For a moment, doubt crept in. Her frail hands. The way her shoulders slumped. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe someone else was behind all this. And then I saw it. Just for a second. A flicker. A smile. Not a sad one. Not a desperate one. A victorious one. My stomach twisted. She was still playing the game. And I had just walked right into it. Some things in life come at you like a slow-moving storm. You see the clouds gather. You feel the pressure shift. You know what's coming. And yet, when it finally arrives, it still blindsides you. I thought I was prepared. I thought I understood the depths of my mother's madness. But I was wrong. So very, very wrong. I hired a private investigator. A man named Darius Cole, quiet, methodical, the kind of person who could find secrets buried 6 feet deep in concrete. 2 days later, he called me. Daniel. His voice was tight. We need to meet. Now. I barely made it through the front door of his office before he dropped a thick folder onto the table. You're not going to like this. I opened it, and my world tilted. Margaret was never poor. The bank accounts, hidden offshore, tucked away under different names, proved it. Millions. Enough to buy anything. Anyone. I clenched my jaw. Where did the money come from? Darius exhaled slowly. That's the next part. He slid another file toward me. Inside were names. Faces. Men with criminal records as long as my arm. Drug lords. Fixers. Killers. And in the middle of it all, Margaret. Tied to them in ways I couldn't yet see. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. My mother had connections. Dangerous ones. And worse, she had been using them. Darius flipped to another page. Security footage. Grainy, but unmistakable. Elena. Walking down a quiet street, glancing over her shoulder. She knew she was being followed. And the man behind her? Darius circled his face. He's connected to your mother. My breath caught. A name scrawled beneath the image sent ice through my veins. Victor Holloway. A man I had never met, but one my mother had known intimately. Her former lover. A man she had kept secret for decades. I felt the room spin. This wasn't just revenge. It was personal. And I was running out of time. I barely slept after that. Every shadow felt too long. Every whisper too close. I started seeing things. A figure on the street corner. A silhouette in my rearview mirror. Once, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in a store window, Margaret. Watching. Waiting. But when I turned, there was nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. That I was just exhausted. That I was letting my fear turn into hallucinations. Until the night she came back. I woke up to the feeling of being watched. My room was dark. Still. But something was wrong. The air felt heavier. Charged. I blinked the sleep away and turned my head and froze. She was there. Margaret. Standing at the foot of my bed. Her nightgown billowed slightly, though there was no breeze. Her eyes, dark, unreadable, locked onto mine. And then, in a voice that sent ice through my veins, she whispered, I told you, darling. No one loves you like I do. The lights flickered. The door slammed shut. And then darkness. If you were hooked till the very end, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling stories. What do you think happened next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling tales, and until next time, see you soon.